So we are here as part of Our Stories, Our Terms, and the SNCC Legacy Project. And we've got with us Rachael Gilmer from Dream Defenders and Dr. Dee Jackson from BYP 100. Now, just an intro, right? This is going to be a conversation. I usually don't moderate because I like to talk, but I'm going to try and play both roles at this point. So I'm hoping, that this can be a real conversation among the three of us, and not like a panel where, people say, oh, come in when you want to, but this really is true. I'm hoping that when somebody answers a question, if somebody wants to jump in for an elaboration, you want to add a point, go ahead and do that, right? This is going to be as easy as we can. So I have a few topics I want to talk about, but let me start with the first one, which is the usual, right? Which is, how did you all get involved in the movement? And was there a particular moment or an incident? And I'll let whoever wants to go first, and then I'll pick up the rear. So maybe Rachael, why don't you go first?
Sure. And thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to get to be in conversation with both of you. So I'm originally from Oregon. I am biracial, Black and white. And growing up in such a white place and being so racially ambiguous, I really struggled around just having a sense of self, knowing who I was growing up. And in first grade, I got a scholarship, the only one in my family, I'm one of 6 siblings, to go to this private school in my town. And that school was all white. And, I really felt this kind of, I had this compartmentalization between like all these like white, successful people that I went to school with. And then the challenges I was experiencing at home. Both my parents struggled with heroin addiction. And I really began to like associate that with Blackness and associate success with whiteness, and just really struggled around like internalized anti-Blackness and feeling a lot of shame around who I was. And I had no language to like understand that that's what was happening to me, but that's what was happening to me. I mean, I used to ask my dad to like pick me up around the block from my school, to turn down his music when he'd pick me up from school, because I had all this shame around who I was. And I ended up getting a full ride to go to college in New York, and my school, I was like the first blind class. So my class was diverse, but my school was very white overall. And I really wanted to like, once again, like fit in with all these white kids I was in school with. And yeah, I mean, when I grew up in my town, everybody knew who my family was. But when I was across the country, nobody knew who my family was. So I found myself just out of trying to survive and fit in this like, this Northeast elite college environment, just like lying about who I was. And people would say, oh, you look mixed. What are you mixed with? And I would be like, oh, nothing. By the end of my freshman year, I was like super depressed because I had no sense of self. I had a terrible eating disorder because I was trying to look like all these skinny white girls on my hallway. And I was completely lost. And I ended up like, divine intervention, grace of God, getting bumped from my freshman English class and ending up, the only class available was this James Baldwin lecture. And that completely changed the course of my life. I mean, I had a professor talk about race for the first time. It gave me a whole language to understand my experiences that I'd never had before. And I felt like the blinds had been pulled, off of me. Like I went from feeling like deep down inside me, there was something wrong with me my whole life, to realizing, okay, there's nothing wrong with me and a lot wrong with the world. And that was like so empowering to me, like, knowledge, it was just so empowering to me. And shortly after that, my dad ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. And my dad, I realized when my dad was passing, I was like not only mourning losing my dad, but I was also kind of mourning becoming politicized around who I am, becoming politicized around, race. At the time my dad was passing, and feeling like I was mourning kind of having a full relationship with him because of the ways that I felt like I had this lens of anti-Blackness that got in the way of us having a full relationship. And when my dad was dying, there was like, my dad was when he got clean when I was in middle school, he was very big in the recovery community. And there were all these people who came by his bedside when he was passing, saying that your dad helped me get clean and change my life. And at his funeral, there were hundreds of people there with stories just about how my dad had changed them. And I suddenly saw just the fullness of who my dad was and his transformation. And I kind of made a commitment, like, I want to get involved in the community. So when I went back to school, I started volunteering at a community center and found community organizing. For the first time, I was a part of like a Theater of the Oppressed youth program. And the second I found community organizing, I was like, okay, there's people who are, all day, every day trying to change the world, that there was no looking back. And after that, right after I graduated, Occupy happened. And then a year later, or 2 years later, Trayvon Martin was murdered. And so all these moments, I found organizing, I found community, and I, just felt like there was nothing else I could be doing with my life. And I don't know, reflecting now on like that experience and all the attacks we're seeing right now around critical race theory and around our history in our schools, like, I think it's no coincidence that the right sees the site of college campuses as a place to attack, because I think so many young people of our generation did get politicized on campuses, that became a site of resistance. I mean, and so I think it's no wonder the right is attacking that. And yeah, I think it's something for us to really think about how we push back against, because young people, I mean, the classroom is a place where young people are being politicized. And so it's no wonder the right's trying to stop that.
That's right. Ooh, that's lovely. All right. Didi, you want to go next?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Rachel, for that really powerful story. And yeah, we've been friends now for a long time, but I don't think I've heard that story. So I appreciate it. Yeah, and thank y'all for having me. My experience growing up, so I grew up in Philadelphia. Both my parents are born and raised in Philadelphia, come from a very Black, African American in particular, working low class community, family. My mom has been a legal secretary since before I was born. And my dad has been worked in factories, meat packaging factories in and outside of Philly since also before I was born. And I grew up in a very Black, poor, working class neighborhood. So we moved into that neighborhood like right after white flight in Philadelphia. So it was less of a diverse community by the time I was in elementary school. And I went to all public schools that at the time, obviously, you realize things when you get older. But at the time, I didn't realize how just underfunded the schools that I went to were. Me and my sisters all went to like the neighborhood public schools that were very underfunded and highly over policed, and lots of zero tolerance policies. And when I was in high school, I was like top in my school in math, and then only to go to college and get a D the first time I took math. So that was a lot of like my education background. And single parent home, come from generations of single motherhood as well. And so my family, I'm realizing now, is a very lots of feminist ideology, lots of feminist theory within my family structure. And my mom's side is very much big into education. So my grandma was a professor, her sister was a professor. They both retired. And then I have a lot of family that works in education in all different ways in my family. So a long lineage of just going to Rachel's point of folks that really, really care and have really put a lot of energy and believe in knowledge being power and being powerful and being the way that we move forward as a people. And I went to grad school. So I went to undergrad at Cheney University, which is the oldest historically Black institution for higher learning. And there I was a dancer, and I played tennis. So I was just like a jock basically, and in college all 4 years, and was active on campus. It's a really small school, so very much like a family kind of vibe. And I studied recreation and sports, recreation and leisure management, which really taught me how to really embrace and build community, not in the sense of organizing, but more in the sense of how do you like studying recreation and leisure is actually studying the things that make people happy. And so how do you connect with your community by building things that make people happy? Sports programs, community clubs, things like that. So that was kind of always a part of my study, was about being a part of the community. And then I decided to go to grad school in Miami to get my master's in recreation and sports management at FIU, Florida International University. And it was at the same time that all of the things around Trayvon Martin was happening. So by the time I entered school, Trayvon Martin had been murdered, but the indictment, the cases, the protests, all of the things were happening while I had just moved to Florida. Didn't know a single person in Florida when I moved there, and was just really craving to be connected to what was happening at the time. And so I took to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram to see what was going on. And I went to the Black Student Union meetings at my school, because that was where the Black people were, naturally. And at one of those meetings, Phil Agnew and another student at my school spoke about Dream Defenders, talked about the work that they were doing in across Florida, that was really organizing people around police brutality, around the stand your ground laws, and around the undocumented community. The DACA movement was also popping off at that time. And so I signed a sheet of paper and had a one-on-one, and got introduced into the organizing world through Dream Defenders, through going to meetings at Miami-Dade Community College, back when it was a community college, attending meetings there and just around the city. And I was learning, obviously, as I was going, for sure, but always appreciated that there was someone always wanting to make sure that I was showing up to the meetings. And that was what kind of kept me really committed. I think the thing that changed really the course of my life was my last semester in grad school. I went to this frat party that was in Deerfield Beach, which is in Broward County, Florida, close to FAU. And there was a frat party that was happening there. I had a friend that was part of the fraternity that went to my school. So it was around 4 of us that all went to this party. And maybe like 20, 30 minutes into this party, a bunch of sheriffs and police came, and they raided the party. They violently beat people up, scared the shit out of all of us, was kind of locking people into this warehouse where the party was. If you left, you would be threatened with arrest for trespassing. If you stayed longer, outside or just lingering around, you would get arrested. So it was like a very, scary situation in general. And then of course, what I knew at that time was to record them. And so I was recording the police and what they were doing. I mean, they were chasing people up and down the street. It was really chaotic. And this one officer saw me recording him, and he was like yelling and screaming at me to like get out of there and get away, like go down the street, you know, just like was really aggressive, doing a lot. And my friends were like, oh, Didi, just do what he says. Just walk down the street. And I'm like, where am I supposed to go? Our driver was like locked in the warehouse where people were being threatened to be arrested if they came out. And so I just walked down the street. I called my mom, who's obviously in Philly. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't even know where I am. For real. I'm in Florida, you know? And then next thing I knew, I was on the ground. I was tackled on the ground by the same police officer. My phone was thrown out of my hand. And he, arrested me, put his knees on my back and handcuffed me and put me in a cop car. And I was in Broward County jail for 24 hours. And it was my first time being arrested. The driver, my friend, he was also arrested. It was like 6 of us that was arrested that weekend. Our like mug shots was on the news circuit for the entire weekend. They were calling it a riot that happened. The frat party turned riot was actually the headline that happened. And I was unspeakably angry. Like if there was already just the already lingering kind of the hot coals that was already in me of, you know, the things that happened with Trayvon Martin, but also a lot of the things that I had seen growing up happening to Black people on a regular basis unjustly. Like this was the thing that really lit my match. And I organized around that. There was a bunch of people that showed up to the police department the next day to like put in complaints of the way that the police reacted. I had to go back and forth to Miami even after I graduated to kind of clear up the whole court situation. I was arrested and charged with resisting arrest. You know how that goes, resisting arrest. And I've been doing work around defunding and disarming and delegitimizing the police really since then, and have been connected and stayed in connection with the Dream Defenders community since then. And now I'm the national director of BYP 100.
So let me just ask, so when you get connected with BYP 100, it's through what vehicle?
So you mean connected to Dream Defenders?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, to BYP 100.
How did I get to BYP?
Yeah.
So I got to BYP 100. After I graduated, I moved to North Carolina, which is where my mom's side of the family is all from, and got a job basically because I was a Dream Defenders. Immediately got hired to be like a campus organizer with like this statewide student organizing organization, and did a lot of college student organizing across the state for a few years, and then was organizing with all these HBCU students that were basically facing the same things at their schools, where like tuition hikes are going up, but their majors, different majors, especially the arts, humanities, and education majors, were being completely just destroyed and across the state. And they needed a home to be getting some strategic alignment. And that's where I found BYP 100 and started the Durham chapter.
I got you. Okay. Okay, it's interesting because I have commonality with both y'all stories.
Yeah.
So yeah, I grew up in Tarrytown, New York, right, which is about 45 miles north of New York City. Okay, and I grew up in what is probably still called Under the Hill. So I could hear the train coming, and I could run and catch it because I was that close to it. And my mother and father, my father, I later found out. I mean, I didn't know this growing up. I knew that he had helped to he was a union man, because when I was growing up in Tarrytown, I didn't know it as a suburb. I knew it as a factory town, because we had the United Auto, we had the Chevrolet plant. My father and everybody whose father I knew worked at the plant. That's all that you could tell time from the ships coming off the plant. And so what I grew up around was Black people, Poles, Irish, and Italians. Black folks were only 10% of Tarrytown. My mother had an 8th grade education, read everything, but also played a mean jazz piano until my father stopped her. She was going around with this little local jazz combo playing dates, but I think my father must have thought that was a little, no. So that stopped. My sister was about 9 years older than me. And so she was the one who told me, you know, Daddy was the treasurer, the UAW local. And so I kind of knew that, but not really. What I did know that was when I was 7 years old, I get called out of class and I find out that my father has died of a heart attack on the line. So my mother becomes a full-time, you know, a single parent. And she gets my sister to college, she gets me to college, but just to know, she never talked about race, right? So all the little slights that I experienced growing up in Tarrytown, I assumed were personal. You know, I'm the only Black child in my AP history class in 10th grade. They're doing a chapter on Reconstruction, and it's the only illustrations in that thing. And I found out later, by the way, that that's the national textbook at the time. The only illustrations are from the Klansmen, on which Birth of a Nation was based, right? And all my little white classmates are turning around, looking at me. I'm embarrassed. I can't look up. But I had no way of who knew about systemic racism, right? We didn't talk about that stuff. All I knew was that, oh, this is what happens when Black people are, you know, in any control of anything. And that's the message that my white classmates got. Okay, so we go through that. I get a 4-year scholarship to Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. And it's mainly because, as you all have talked about, they're trying to, you know, enlarge they're trying to diversify at Swarthmore, good Quaker college that it is. And so I come in with, you know, the largest incoming class of Black kids. So there were 8 of us, and 4 boys and 4 girls, presumably, you know, so we wouldn't have to cross lines to date and stuff. So, but it's when I'm there that I'm looking around to see what else is happening on campus. So I go to this meeting, and it turns out it's an SDS meeting. Now, you know, SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, support primarily white, Northern, they're supportive of the sit-ins going on. But I didn't know any of that, right? I don't know from nothing. I go because my mother's not there to stop me. So I go into this meeting. I find out that, you know, they're doing a few things. One is that they are helping to organize the all-Black, all-female cafeteria staff, which includes me, because with this scholarship, I'm doing, you know, I'm bussing tables. I'm part-time work study. And so we, you know, I start getting more and more involved in this SDS chapter. And so they're organizing the all-Black, you know, cafeteria staff. I help with that. They're doing some stuff with tutorials in nearby Chester, Pennsylvania, which had segregated schools. But the main thing that gets me really into the movement and into SNCC really is that they're doing bus loads. They're joining bus loads of nearby colleges that are going down to work in Cambridge, Maryland, on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And so I get there, and you know, this was a group that was an affiliate of SNCC, and they'd asked SNCC's help. So, but I don't know any of this. I don't know any of this when I go in. I just know that I see this strong, amazingly strong woman, Judy Richardson, and she is kind of the most visible leader, because this is a group-centered leadership. It was called the Cambridge Nonviolent Action Committee. Nonviolent, a little bit of a misnomer, because Gloria was not nonviolent. So I come in through that, though. And then, you know, I start getting arrested more, and I'm there on weekends and not on school. And I will tell you, when you were saying, Dee, about the rage, there is a place for righteous rage, because that's what got me. You know, I'm looking at this place that we're trying to get into. It's a barn grill. It's dirty. It smells of liquor. And I'm trying to figure out why even white people want to be there, right? But the main thing is, this big burly white guy's telling me I can't come through the doors. Now, had I come from the South, I would have known what it means to, you know, go against authority, to go against this, but I'm coming from Tarrytown. And so all I feel is just, you must be kidding. You know, you're preventing me from going into your dinky little place, right? But there was a visceral thing about that. And so I end up finding, I check with my college. Yes, I can keep the scholarship. I end up taking off the next semester of my of school, which was the first semester of the sophomore year. And I go down and I end up working for SNCC. But when I first come into it, it's really a visit. I go down with Reggie Robinson, who was the SNCC field secretary in Cambridge. And he says, look, I'm going down, see the national office, come on, go with me. And then we'll come back up again. So I come in, and what was amazing to me, again, see, when you all talk about the vision of Black folks, and particularly you, Rachel, my vision of Black folks was really the projects or the regular local people that regular working class people that I saw. And there were no Black people with any power in Tarrytown. We finally got one Black cop, but I don't think he could arrest anybody who wasn't Black. And it was Tarrytown. It wasn't, big stuff. So I'm coming in, I come into this little dinky office with lots of little rooms, and it's the SNCC national office, right? And I come in and I'm seeing, Julian, don't know any of these people. I find out later it's Julian Bond, and he's typing these press releases with 2 fingers. I see Ruby Dar Smith Robinson. She's on the phone with these projects. I see John Lewis. He's just come in from a rally. I see Jimmy Bolton, who's on the phones, and they're talking to all these projects. I see this energy that it's like, oh my God, right? Then Foreman, executive secretary of the organization, he finds out that I can type 90 words a minute, because they had tried in Tarrytown, since I was Black, they had tried to put me into business classes until my mother said, no, that's not going to happen, right? So she gets me back into the academic track. But okay, so I knew how to type, and I knew how to take what was called steno, right? Shorthand. So Foreman says, oh, you need to be my secretary, right? So I come in, I never make it back to Swarthmore. I never make it back to Cambridge, but what it does is it gives me this sense, this energy of young people changing the world. And so many of them look like me. And it was like, oh my gosh, and then they were so welcoming, which was amazing because I knew nothing. So that was the beginning of it. And then I just learned. And because I was Foreman secretary, I'm talking to the network of Friends of SNCC and the campus Friends of SNCC and the pro bono lawyers up in New York and the Black lawyers in the South. It was like this bird's eye view of the organization, and they valued me. And that was what was so important to me. I, who knew nothing, they made a place for me. And that, that was the beginning of, it's like, I never want to leave here. So, okay, talked enough. Okay, let me go to the next thing. How did this movement change you personally? And I'm asking this because a lot of times, when we were doing Eyes on the Prize, or we were doing the Hands on the Freedom Plow, what you realized was that it wasn't just that folks who participate in these movements, that they're changing their communities. They are themselves getting changed. So why don't you all talk about how you're different from having been in these movements?
I think one of the things that changed about, I learned how to be a community member. Like I learned how to be a community, and like Philly is a big city. It's a lot of people. I grew up in like a smaller section, which is like Southwest Philly, and like pretty much a lot of my family was very close by. And a lot of the people I went to elementary school with, I ended up going to high school with, and that kind of thing. But it still wasn't, I didn't have to do anything to be a part of the community. I think that organizing, especially in North Carolina, once I moved here, taught me that like, oh, right, that is how I stay safe. That is how I understand what is even happening in the small version of the world around me. That is how I get connected to people that care about what I care about, and know the people that don't care about what I care about. It's how I like get a chance to really build an analysis about power and about how it works. And I think that, yeah, being an organizer and making a commitment to my own growth and development for the sake of the community's growth and development is the thing that changed. Yeah, the most significant thing that I continue to learn about is like how to really be a community member. Yeah.
Why is that important?
I mean, I think like, well, I think, and my perspective of this has also changed with the pandemic, of like the pandemic really forcing isolation and the already like pervasive nature of like individualism because we live in capitalism. Like, I think the pandemic has also kind of forced this isolation, and now there's a new, even newer way that I have to be in an agreement and in a commitment of being in community with people, even through the pandemic. And I think it's important because in order to fight against what we are up against, we are going to need everybody. Like, we are literally going to need everybody. And as many people as possible, I want to be in community with, so that we can be in the fight together, essentially. Not in a sense that is like this kind of like, unity in the community. I feel like that's a great start. Unity in the community is a great start. And it's like, what's the type of unification that we need to be in, which is like one that is about building power. And that can only come from building a really intentional community.
And I see you nodding, Rachel.
Yeah, that really, really, really resonates with me. And funny, because I think back when I first joined the movement and how much pressure I put on myself, like as an individual. I mean, well, one, I thought Dream Defenders, like the revolution, like either happened or didn't happen because of Dream Defenders, like it was on us. And then personally within that, I felt like it was like literally on me. And I put a lot of pressure on myself. I was going to be this super like rigorous revolutionary, and, I was all about strategy, all about discipline, just like really, really, really hard on myself. And I think, it's such a blessing, like being building an organization with other people and being in community together. It's a really intimate thing because people reflect back, like, you give each other feedback, and people really, you see your reflection in other people, and people reflect back to you the ways you need to grow. And people are really committed to each other's growth and like being honest with each other. And, I feel like people really reflected back to me that I needed to like stop putting so much pressure on myself and have more grace with myself and like have fun, like, like not like lose all the joy in life because of all the pain and suffering in the world. So I feel like really grateful for that. And I think I've learned to just have like a lot more compassion for myself, to have a lot more patience with like myself and others. And to realize like we're in this work to also be like transforming ourselves. So yeah, I feel really grateful. It is really a blessing to be building an organization with other people and to be like, committed to challenging each other, growing with each other. And I feel like the other thing is just like building a thing is so hard, and it requires you to like make mistakes constantly and bounce back from your mistakes collectively and like learn from them, but not like give up. And I think that level of like resilience that you build, I think there's a lot of like, we're living in a time where people have like this idea that the movement is supposed to be perfect, and that they expect perfection of the movement, of other people, this kind of like purity politics, like unless you are like perfect, it's somehow not worth it to do anything. And so, but yeah, like, I don't know, building movement is a messy thing. We're a product of the world, and we're also trying to change the world. So it's going to be full of all the mess and complexity and contradictions of the world. And so just being able to like push through that and fail through that and keep getting back up, keep pushing forward, the resilience that I think we forged to that is like just such a gift and a blessing.
Can I just, I'm going to answer this myself too, but can the both of you just talk about what is it within your organizations that that you've built to make sure that you can make these mistakes and still have that sense of community that will support you? And is it there yet?
It's hard to say.
Okay.
I think coming into, so I was a member for like 2 years, and then was organized to apply for the role of national director, national co-director. And I think I felt like I had enough support to cover me for the mistakes that I would eventually make. And I don't know if I do. It kind of feels like I feel like I have people cheering me on for sure. And I have people that definitely feel like I'm in the right place. And when it comes down to the nitty gritty, day to day, really complex, really like the complexities and all the things that need solutions and navigating through, it's hard to see that level of support. So maybe it's like there's a scale or something of support at any given moment. So it is really hard to track. And I think the organization was such in a different place when I was a member. It was like really, really even younger than it is now. And I don't think I realized that coming into my role, and I'm only really just realizing it now. The thing that nobody really told me was that my primary role as the national director was not going to be to build this really robust mass, young, Black, radical base of really dope organizers. My role would actually be to build a workplace. And I don't think it didn't click for me until very, very recent. And I feel like the pandemic kind of also robbed me of a lot of opportunities and a lot of dreams and visions that I had around what I would be doing with my time. But, and this is also, Rachel, you can share also your experience. I feel like this is part of the challenge and the thing that we're going to have to fight in terms of the nonprofit industrial complex, because it just like scoops up really talented organizers, and you are forced to build a workplace, which is not the same kind of work. It's not the same kind of organizing. Some of the same like skills, tactics, like they just don't always apply. And you have to learn and build new ones. And that takes time, and it takes experience, and it takes practice. And the risk is so high when it comes to those kinds of mistakes. It's one thing to make a mistake for a large like community town hall, and it's a completely different thing to make a mistake where people's livelihoods is on the line. Yeah.
Rachel, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the other dynamic in this is just when we started Dream Defenders 10 years ago when BYP was starting, it didn't have the organizations didn't have the level of visibility. Like we had to build that, you know, like we were just like a ragtag group of young people coming together, planning a march across the state, you know, but we never built an organization before. And then, you know, after the Capitol, when we like surged into the public spotlight in this big way, the level of like expectations that get like projected onto the organization. And, you know, like anything, social media is such a farce. Like what you see on the internet is really different than like the reality of actually being in the ins and outs and the day-to-day of building an organization. And so I think like one of our challenges too is that like people just come in and like with really high expectations of like what the experience is going to be. But like actually building an organization is like really grueling, challenging work. It is like, you know, the like non-sexy work of like knocking on doors where you're like planting seeds, but you're not seeing those seeds bloom. And I think one of the challenges now is like, how do we get, and I think it's even like more challenging in the age of the pandemic, is how do we get people to like ride through that process with us when people like are, you know, this American culture, like microwave, want instant results, expect it to be like, you know, a happy ending with a bow on top, you know, like that's people's expectations of what experiences are. And like actually organizing, especially in the conditions that we are in, are full of heartbreak, you know? And like, we have to keep resisting and fighting because there's no, you know, there's no alternative to doing that. So yeah, it's a huge uphill battle. I mean, in our membership handbook, like when you join the organization, one of our principles is fail forward. And I think people get it maybe on intellectual level, like, okay, there's going to be failure as part of this and we have to keep getting back on the horse. And it's totally different to like actually experience that and keep doing it, you know, and continue to have hope and continue to you know, have patience for each other, have patience for the process. So yeah, it is an ongoing battle. And yeah, I think especially in this age of social media, it's really challenging to prepare folks for what it really means to be an organization.
And I really, you know, I'm listening to you and thinking, boy, it really is. I mean, I knew social media really is can be so vicious, right? And it can just do things and you can't control it. I mean, it's out there and it's multiplies. But one of the things I think for us in SNCC was that we did understand how to celebrate even the small victories. And that was really, really important. You know, when I'm thinking about, for example, again, for me, it was also the personal growth, right? And as I said, I knew nothing, right? And so I decide, you know, in 64 or 65, I'm going to do a residential freedom school, right? And I'm going to bring young people from the projects that we're working on together with folks living in Chicago. And it was actually not the Robert Taylor homes, Cabrini Green, the big high rise that they tore down. And there were real challenges. I mean, first of all, I didn't know enough about what challenges we would see. And so I had not planned for them. I thought that we could run it as we had our SNCC, you know, freedom schools and that kind of thing. You couldn't do that. This is a different reality in Chicago. These folks have a real different reality. So although I'm hoping the young people coming from the South, they'll be able to see this is up north. This is what happens even after you get the vote. You got to keep organizing. And I'm hoping the northern young people will see, well, there is hope. You can change some things, right? So I'm hoping there'll be this interaction. But all kinds of stuff jumped out. I mean, I had one of the young kids pull a knife on me, you know. So there were things that I had not planned for. But I will tell you, one thing was there were SNCC people who believed in me, even though I wouldn't have believed in myself. I would not have thought I could do this, right? Because I'd never done a residential freedom school, right? Charlie Cobb comes up and says, oh, let me know what you need. Stokely comes up and says, tell me where you want me to be. Ivanhoe says, okay, I may know some funding sources, shoot me a draft and let me see what I can do. So we go, but it was Charlie who I remember so clearly. I mean, Stokely was good too, but Charlie comes up. And now this is in a basement of a church, right? And the guys from Cabrini Green, and you had, I think it was all guys from Cabrini Green, and then a mixed male and female from our Southern projects, only about 10 kids, 10 young people, right? And I'm 20 at the time, so I'm not that old either. So Charlie comes up and he gets up to the board and he says, he doesn't say anything to anybody. He puts his, back to the group, and he puts on the board, niggas can't get together. Niggas can't stay together. Niggas ain't shit. Honey, there is total silence. But what was interesting is that's exactly, particularly what the Cabrini Green kids are thinking. So we had one of the best conversations that we had the entire time we were doing this for 3 weeks, entire time that we had it, because he put up there exactly what they were thinking and why they were led to think that. And then you get into, well, why is Cabrini Green like it is? And why is this, but at that point, that's what they're thinking. So he took them right where they were and then moved them beyond, and they did it themselves. I remember I didn't have to ask too many questions because they're all talking to each other, So I guess, but there were a lot of bad things that happened during that time too. But what I'm thinking about is that particular discussion, because it was just so eye-opening to me, Now I do want to talk about, I'm going to skip it over. Are you all okay if I ask a few more questions? Are you? I don't know what you're. Oh, okay. Okay. Cool. Okay. So, who helped you grow as a leader? Generally, specifically. Okay, I'm gonna go think about it. For me, it was Miss Baker, and it's not because she knew me, right? I mean, she knew I was there, but I wasn't a leader, right? What I did is I watched her. It's almost like young people talk about their teachers, like I remember something that my 11th grade teacher told me, right? He didn't know that he was going to have that effect on me. I remember, I looked at how she moved, how Foreman moved, how Bob Moses moved, how Ruby Doris moved. So I remember something really happened, personal, and somebody's spouse came in and slapped them during a meeting, just before a meeting, right? And so nobody talked about in the meeting, because you don't talk about stuff like that. The meeting is for the meeting. But what Miss Baker did is she took that person off, and I could hear her say, so what's going on? Now she wants to know, first of all, personally, she wants to know that that person is okay. But the second part is, are you going through anything that will be dysfunctional, that will make you less able to work and to function as we need you to, right? She never talked. So there were a lot of things about Miss Baker that I watched. I watched how folks looked at Ruby Doris Smith Robinson and how I did. I was told when I came down from Swarthmore, look, if you want to be on staff with SNCC, which I had to be because my mother had no money, so I was going to have to be supported through this, this time off, even with this little $9.64 that we got. So it was, but Ruby Doris, I remember Ivanhoe saying, when I was in jail, Ruby Doris sent me a letter every day when I went into jail in Greenwood. People said, I remember somebody saying, look, Ruby Doris said I couldn't do this, so I didn't do it. There were ways that people looked at the leadership that kind of surprised me, and that was male and female. So now I've given you all enough time. And maybe there aren't.
I feel really lucky that I had a lot of people who saw me as a leader before I saw myself as a leader. Even back to my like 6th grade teacher who was like, you should run to be the representative for our homeroom. And I was like, well, shouldn't an 8th grader do it? And she was like, no, you should. So in 6th grade, I was the representative of our homeroom in middle school. And like, you know, but like people who like pour into you and like believe in you and see something in you and you don't, you know, before you maybe even think of yourself in that light. And I had a lot of Black women who really poured into me. You know, mentors, some of my mentors, Serena, Midge, Trisha, Miss Avell Gordley, who like, you know, even before I thought I could do a thing, were like, you got it. And like, I'm here if you need support, but like, you got it. And yeah, that was like, you know, I think super foundational to me, just being willing to like courageously try a thing. Again, this like culture of like fail forward, figure it out along the way, like you're gonna make it happen, you got it. Like that was because people told me I got it, you know, told me they believed in me, told me they had faith in me. So I think that really shaped me. I think BOLD really shaped me, Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity. And I think it shaped a lot of us in the movement. Denise Perry, shout out, like, just the like, you are what you practice. And like, you can talk one game, but how are you really embodying that as a leader? You know, and the embodied leadership of I can, just how do we show up clear, grounded, intentional, like BOLD really instilled that in me. And I feel so grateful for that experience. I think going to Palestine really shaped me as a leader. I think just it gave me, you know, as oppressed people in the US, sometimes we don't always realize also the privileges that we have as being American citizens. And when you go halfway around the world and see, wow, like the weapons being used against these people are being paid with by our taxpayer dollars, that gives you a certain level of like, wow, I really have a responsibility as people in the belly of the beast to transform this country, because it's going to transform the world. Like that experience in Palestine, I think really cemented my like commitment in a really different way than I'd experienced before. Also seeing just the resilience of the Palestinian people, the way they still smile and believe in humanity in the face of so much destruction, and in the face of so much people not seeing their humanity, is like was a beautiful, powerful, inspiring thing. And Palestine is always within me in that way. And then I've grown so much from all of my comrades. I mean, like I said before, just being in struggle with people being really committed to your growth for the sake of like, how can you show up as the strongest leader we need for the movement, and all the feedback and just the ways people have reflected back to me, both where I'm strong and where I need to grow, has just been, it's really a really special thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I echo a lot of Rachel's sentiment around the type of leadership. I grew up the oldest daughter, or the oldest child, so it was always from jump, just like, you got to be a good example for your sisters. Your sisters are paying attention to everything that you do. They love everything that you do. You have to be careful. So there was always like just this inherent kind of responsibility, watchfulness that I had to be under as being like the oldest child, and helping to like take care of them and raise them. Even now, they're like grown women, but they'll go to my mom for an answer to a thing, and then they come to me as well for an answer to a thing. It's super cute. So I feel like that has always, you know, kind of been instilled in me as being a leader, and being an example, an example for other little Black girls. And I would say my professor, Dr. Flynn, who was the chair of the recreation department at at Cheney University for a really long time. He was also a person that was always pushing me to, because I was a rec major, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 other women that was in my class. And then the rest was all like the rest of the jocks, all the basketball players, all the football players, who I had a really good friendship and relationship with. And he would just be like, yeah, you can get them together. They will listen to you, Dee. Like whatever you say, they will definitely listen to you. And tried to get me to recruit more Black women in my school to be a part of the rec department. So there was always something that someone was asking me to do, because they felt really trusting and felt like I could be reliable. So I really try to bring that into who I am as a leader. And then in terms of organizing, Phil was the person that gave me my very first organizing assignment. He literally handed me a clipboard after a panel and was like, call all of these people and meet with them for a one-on-one. And I was like, a what? What are you talking about? He's like, yeah, just talk to them. You can do it. Like, you just talk to them. You're cool. Just talk to them. I was like, okay. But the other person that really, really, I think, turned me into an organizer was Kimberly Gonzalez. Shout out to Kim. She was a member of Dream Defenders. I think she's Cuban and Puerto Rican, and was like literally with me on campus almost every day, just like we was flyering for different things. She would make sure I made it to all of the meetings that they had at Dream Defenders. We would debrief, we would prep, and was in this level of like really consistent communication with the organization that really helped me clarify. I didn't know anything about undocumented or immigrant things. I didn't know anything about any of that. And she was the person that really helped me learn more about what was happening in Miami, what was happening in Florida. And so she's like the person that I would say really turned me into an organizer. And then I think just like having a really deep commitment to organizing in the South, and the idea that where the South goes, where the global South goes, but also where the southern region of this country goes, the rest. And obviously we have the history of the civil rights movement to also lean on to that kind of sentiment of being committed to really building in the South as the place that serves as the example, that has the full stories, that has the deep history of all kinds of iterations of Reconstruction. And I would say in North Carolina, especially folks like Serena Sebring and Manju and Brian Perlmutter, who these are all like not even that much older than me, like we're all kind of almost in the same generation. And I think that was also a thing that a separate thread, I think, is around, I think what our generation was a lost opportunity, was like having this consistent connection with the generation of organizers before us. I don't feel like we were granted that opportunity. I think, for a lot of reasons that happened, especially in the Black Power movement, with all of the COINTELPRO folks being either exiled or imprisoned, or like going straight into academia and losing touch with the grassroots, which is, we're the babies of neoliberalism. So that's the result of that. But all that to say that a lot of the folks that I would look to, that I get advice from, are folks that are exactly just like in my generation, that are figuring it out together, that are trying different things, that are sharing resources, that are, and I think BOLD also provides a space for us to be in that together, and developing different practices that serve us in whatever role we decide to be in the movement. I think is what I lean on when I'm lost or unsure.
That's lovely. Let me ask you, are there any particular challenges with being a female leader? And see, it was nice hearing you talk about the various people, male and female, and however they, identify, but those folks being supports for you. And that's what I found in SNCC, that it wasn't just the women, it was the men too. But I don't know what it was like for you. And I was not a leader, and you all are.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are particular challenges being a woman. And, I was, when I first joined Dream Defenders, the organization was probably always majority femme. But there was like an outside perception that we were like an organization of mostly men. So when women would go and like travel to other parts of the country and people would meet us, they'd be like, oh, whoa, I didn't even know there were women leaders in Dream Defenders. So the like invisibilization of women in the organization, which I don't think was like anything that we did wrong. I think it was like external projections that made women invisible, that created lots of challenges among our team and among our membership. Like the external projection of patriarchy created then a lot of challenges that we then had to deal with as an organization. And we actually, one of the things we did when I first came to Dream Defenders was we actually read the SNCC list of all the ways that sexism showed up in SNCC.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know that, Judy.
No.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know who wrote it in SNCC, but it's like literally a list of like all the ways sexism showed up in SNCC. I think it was written in I saw it in we found it in the archive. But it would be like,
do you know who wrote it?
No, but I'll find it. Do you know, Dee Dee? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And it would be like little things like women take notes in the meetings.
Oh, that's when we had our sit-in. Yeah, I was the organizer of the sit-in. Yeah.
Oh, you were? Okay, then you got to give us all the story. But yeah,
that's the position paper by Mary King.
Okay.
But see, there was a different reality, and this is where we can talk about this, a different reality by white women in the organization than by Black women in the organization.
That was very clear. It was a white woman who wrote it?
Well, it was Mary King and Casey Hayden, and it was called the White Women's Position Paper. And that was, as a matter of fact, when it comes out, it's 1964. We've just gone through Freedom Summer, and the Democratic Party turning their backs on us. We're now at Waveland, and Foreman had said, you all need to do position papers. Think about what we need to do next. So, and his idea was position papers. And so some people did that. Now, Mary King, Casey Hayden, who were very prominent in the organization. Mary King was Julian's assistant, worked with Julian, and Casey was based in the Mississippi Project. Some people say that Ruby Dara signed on, but see, it really was primarily white women. And I found that when we were doing Hands on the Freedom Plow, what you get in the hands, the 52 women who are SNCC women in Hands on the Freedom Plow, the Black women almost uniformly talk about, this is the most powerful I have ever felt. Jean Smith says, I felt that I was only bound by what I myself felt I was able to do. So we're talking, and you will find that all the way through. Now, some differences are like Dottie loved it. Dottie, and she's white, right? Penny also loved it. But certainly when you look at the 52 women, and when you look at who signed that paper back in 1964, those are primarily white women who did that. Mm-hmm. Now, so for me, I organized the sit-in, right? And there's a famous photo of me sitting with Ruby Dara Smith Robinson and Mary King and Foreman's first wife, Mildred, Bobby Yancey, who later becomes the second in command at the Schomburg, right? But she was head of Northern Support. And I got tired of doing the minutes. And it was always the women who were asked to do the minutes, right? But that was in the office. That was in the national office. When you got out into the field, that was a whole different ball game. And that's what you get reflected in Hands on the Freedom Plow. That when, now the white women were not able to go, I mean, certainly white women were until 64, they're only in Southwest Georgia, right? Because Sherrod is saying, I am the beloved community. This project will operate like the beloved community, and we will have Black and white in this project. That's Sherrod in Southwest Georgia. That was not operating anywhere else because it would get Black people killed, men and women. So you did not have white women going into a lot of these areas outside of Sherrod's project. However, when we do the sit-in, it's because I'm tired of taking the minutes. I mean, I thought everybody was brilliant, right? And I know how to do shorthand. So the first meeting I have of the executive committee, it's 32 pages. And I'm doing it on typewriter. And every time I make a mistake, as I type it up, I got to do that little green thing. I was tired. I have in my diary, still doing the minutes. Oh, 6 o'clock a.m. I'm still doing the minutes. Okay. So I get tired. And also the women in the office are tired of being asked to do the minutes. So Foreman goes off, and again, I'm his secretary. He goes off to an anti-apartheid meeting. I think that was when it was in London. He comes back, and he comes back to this sit-in. We're holding placards, Now he misrepresented that in his intro to Black revolutionaries, but, and I countered him on that because he made it seem like, oh, he had thought this up, right? And I said, Foreman, now you know you didn't do that. Okay, so, and we have had it out at his book party. We were doing a panel. He said, now I know Judy has a different idea that. I said, yeah, because I got the truth, but you got the right, you go ahead, But the main thing was I could play with it because, and by the way, women stopped doing the minutes. Now, what happened is that sometimes men would pick it up, sometimes they didn't. But the other problem was the guys wanted to talk, so they didn't do minutes too well. But the main thing was once the women said, we will not do this, they did not depend on the men to say, oh, let us then, step back in. No, the main thing was we just didn't do the minutes for a while. Okay. And then guys started taking the minutes a little bit, but the main thing was that was the national office. That when you, for example, there was somebody else who talked about the power that she felt. Because Bernice Johnson Reagan talks about, feeling so powerful in this organization. And I will say, for me, the problem was when I leave SNCC and I leave my circle of SNCC people, women and men, who assumed that I actually had something on my mind and could do things, right? So when it's the 70s and I get into that hardline nationalist movement and guys are saying about, walk 3 steps behind us, because that's the African way. That was that African nationalist thing. It's like, wait, where is this coming from? I didn't get any of this with the guys in SNCC. The saving grace for me was when we're doing the bookstore, the Drum and Spear bookstore, or the Center for Black Education. I am not getting that from any of the SNCC guys who are my closest circle, right? Because they're not playing that. Now, some of the other people, like Maulana Ronkarenga and some of those guys, they're doing the African nationalist thing, but that's not the people who are part of my circle. So I don't have to worry about that. But so I say that to say there was a balance, and it's also important to understand it from the perspective of national office and I know Martha Prescott, who was then Martha Prescott. She then becomes Martha Prescott Norman Noonan. But Martha Prescott talks about how she's in 1964 and she's in the freedoms. They're doing canvassing, and they're for the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and she decides she's going to clean up the perpetually dirty Freedom House in Greenwood. Stokely comes in and looks at how clean it is and sees, and Martha's very proud that she has done this. He says, what are you wasting time cleaning up? You should be out there canvassing, right? Because the assumption was it's not just women's work. Now she's happy because it's clean and the dishes are done and, the floor is not just really nasty, but that was not the assumption that Stokely came. Now, I'm not saying one no sexism, absolutely was, but not in the way that I think people assume it to be because of that paper.
Mhm.
But anyway, go ahead. I
Mhm.
went off on attack.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much
that
for that
history.
history.
Oh,
Oh.
am I echoing for anyone else?
No.
You were,
Oh.
but
Oh,
yeah,
were you?
it's good. I think it's good now.
Yeah, thank you so much for that history. And yeah, just sitting with like all the nuance of it. And yeah, I'm just sitting with what you're saying. But it's interesting because I think the position paper, what it was helpful for us was around just assessing some of the invisible ways that labor is gendered in the organization. And then from that, we ended up creating this women's faction led by Sharika Shah to bring women together in the organization to have more intentional conversation about how we made an intentional effort of both addressing sexism while also building like a unified, powerful organization to fight racism in the world. And from that, we ended up like adopting a Black feminist politic. And you know, through that process, we also realized there was many ways that it wasn't just like sexism wasn't just like a thing that was perpetuated by men. And there was ways in which all of us were perpetuating sexism, while also simultaneously like feeling the power that feeling the like so powerful building the organization. But it just put us on an intentional path of really being like, what does it mean to be building a Black feminist organization? What does it mean to be intentional about how we're splitting labor and all of that? And yeah, I think it's like, I don't know, I think it's really hard being a woman leader because I think there's many ways in which people do have particular expectations of women. Like women are caretakers, and that's like what makes us powerful leaders in many ways, is the ways that we are socialized to take care of people. And it also, I think in my experience, has led to like sometimes really high expectations of like what I'm supposed to be for the organization. Like sometimes I feel like I'm expected to like be people's mom while also being like the leader of the organization. And that's like really hard to hold. And I think there's many ways in which, because there's so many expectations put on women leaders, sometimes we can kind of like, or I'm in this process now of being like, wait, who am I? Like, what do I want my contribution to be? Because I feel like there's been so much projected on me, and me feeling like, you know, women are also, we're very, very socialized to be like the fixers. So like the ways in which I've been like asked to like fix a lot of things and be kind of all things to all people, the way I've internalized that and been like, then kind of lost sight of like, well, what am I good at? Who am I? Like, you know, just sort of like getting regrounded in like who I am. And yeah, it's a lot. And I think both in this moment of like, in the moment of like the pandemic, where I think in many ways those dynamics, at least in Dream Defenders, but I think throughout the movement, have been like exacerbated because the level of like alienation, as Didi was talking about, that exists, the amount of things that people are holding personally, and then kind of needing the organization to support them around, or looking for the organization to like sort of like fix and solve. Oftentimes I felt like as a leader, I was held to this really high kind of perfection standard that was very alienating, and at times just, yeah, it was really alienating. And at times I think because we weren't able to bring people together in the pandemic, there was also ways in which people didn't like see each other's humanity. So like I was just a leader kind of expected to like do all the things, but people didn't realize, well, I'm a human going through all this stuff too. Yeah. And that was like really hard. And I think on top of like all of those expectations, we're also like dealing with all of these attacks from the right, like, and like real attacks, like, you know, like we're in like, you know, DeSantis threatening our organization directly, like you know, the
The stuff
FBI
around
during
the
the
Palestine, when y'all came out in support of Palestine as well.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Attacks from many different sources when that happened. During the uprising, the FBI was like trying to pin activities against stream. Like, so dealing with all of those attacks, plus all these like expectations from the base to be like this perfect leader holding everybody's stuff on top of holding the organization.
Yeah.
Like I felt really, really alone. And I think that I've been in a process of like, how do I kind of reconnect to like not feeling bad for myself in the midst of all those things? And like, how do I show up and like still find like agency when it feels like the weight of the external attacks are on my shoulder, the weight of like these really intense projections from the base and expectations from the base and the alienation of that, like not just fighting to not feel alone, fighting to like not feel like I'm a victim at it all, and fighting to find my agency and still show up like with intentionality. And I think at times, because of all of that, there's times where I kind of built a wall up to protect myself. And I started to like show up like defensively as a leader. And like, that's not helpful, you know, like we need to continue to be like open and grapple with, you know, critiques that people have without showing up defensively is like it's not helpful to my own transformation. It's not helpful to the organization's transformation. So I've been really trying to sit with how do I still show up open, feeling agency, feeling powerful in the midst of all these really challenging dynamics as a woman leader. And I think being in community with people like Didi, I'm like, oh, you're going through it too? Okay, it's not just me. It's, you know, all of our organizations are going through it, like finding community in that way was definitely one of the things that's gotten me through.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, retweet, I mean, it's not it's not the same context as I know people have the perception of Dream Defenders, especially with like yeah, with different things, but I think with BYP 100, you know, we've always had always have had women leadership, the same thing, same way Dream Defenders has. And I think the like Black queer feminists as the lens that the organization has decided to also adopt really adds on to the higher expectations that people come in with for the organization. So they're also expecting this like super unapologetic, liberated space that people can just be any kind of thing and be and do any kind of person. And it's like, because we're one of very few national organizations that is accepting and welcoming of young Black folks, but especially young Black, queer, and trans folks, it's a lot of expectations around what exactly we will be doing. I think one of the things around, and then it's like being the babies of and growing up in this new iteration of like neoliberalism in particular, it really diffuses what you see as possible in the organizing already. And so it gets diluted to being all about representation, to being all about, which is like the identity without the politics, like all about representation, or it's about having access to things that the government should actually be providing, but instead the government is providing less social safety nets. Philanthropy is blown up, and then philanthropy becomes the replacement for the social safety nets that the government should be providing. And therefore, because philanthropy gives to organizations, we should also be the other kinds of social safety nets for people. And then it's about language, which I think like language is important and powerful in its own way. And being clear about the type of language and the type of like like the words that we use and how do we use them, like all of that is all fine, well and good, and it doesn't change the dynamics of who is in power. And so I think like folks are coming into our organizations, into organizing with just that: representation, access, language. Like those are the things that have to change and grow, and then freedom. And it's a really hard uphill battle to be the person that folks know that is in the position of power to say yes or no to any of those things. And it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, for sure. And again, I thought I was going to come in and take all of my great organizing skills and all of my great relationships and like build this mass organization of just like, we were just going to be the training camp for this like radical Black generation of young people. And in a lot of ways, our organizations are that, more than a lot of places. And like, it still feels like we have done so little. We have done so little, because I literally had a conversation with one of our members maybe 2 weeks ago, and we went on a delegation. We went as part of a delegation to Cuba for May Day. And it was us and 150 other young activists from the US, or from North America in particular, that were going to Cuba. And we took around 10 of our members as part of this delegation. And one of the things that happened was, I'll try to be quick with this story. One of the things that happened was that one of the members, you in the Caribbean, it's day one in Cuba. We go to one of the like friendship houses or whatever, and we're all handed a drink. Now, of course, this drink has rum in it because we're in the Caribbean. And it's just, it's just part of the hospitality, but this person didn't know. They have been 4 years sober. They accidentally drank a drink. So they're having a moment. I didn't know. I walked over to everybody, all of my members, and I'm checking on them, seeing how they're doing. And that's when they tell me that they accidentally, I'm like, oh, damn, I'm sorry that happened. Like, do you need anything? And they're like, no, I'm good. I got, I'm probably just going, go for a walk and process, whatever. Okay, cool. So I'm like, okay, well, let me know if you need anything. And, just so you know, we in the Caribbean. So anytime you are handing a drink, we're going to be here for another 9 days. Anytime you handed a drink, it might have liquor in it. Just ask, see if there's some alternatives, get some water, whatever. I kept it pushing. I mean, like literally we came back, and this was like 2 weeks ago. So this is like a whole month after the trip. And they're like, yeah, Didi, I feel like you were unhelpful. They were like, as far as directors go, I feel like you were unhelpful to me in that moment. And I'm like, what did you want me to do? Did you want me to pump it out of your stomach? What did you want me to do? And they're like, well, it would have been nice if you would have offered to go on a walk. And I was like, what? What? And it's it's things like that where I'm like, well, I did tell you to let me know if you needed anything, but there was an additional piece that is like, oh, you wanted me to actually be your mom in that moment, to not only say, well, let me know if you need anything, to offer 12 things that I can do in that moment in order to comfort you. And you didn't actually need it. You just wanted me to offer it. And it is the thing that makes this job incredibly challenging. And it makes it like, who the hell would want to be a leader if that is the kind of thing? And then for them to also couple it with their perception of how I should show up as a leader is misogyny. Like it is absolute misogyny. And this is an organization that always talks about being Black queer feminists and abolitionists and da. And like Rachel said, really getting to like some of these conversations of like, no, how do we practice misogyny and patriarchy in our everyday interactions with each other, but also like, if you are thinking, if if you are thinking about me in this way, I can only imagine how you're thinking about the other Black women in your life and what they are expected to do in your head. And it's just a lot of it that really is just like laborious and really makes it, and it's not, and we aren't actually facing any attacks from the right, from our opposition, from the white supremacists, from the Trumpies. Like it is all internal. The struggles that make this role really hard, and makes being a leader in general, and organizing really hard.
Let me ask you, what is it in the culture of your organization, though, that sustains you, for both of you? What is it that keeps you going culturally within that? See, I'll tell you something, because obviously we went through all of that. I mean, we went through pieces of that in SNCC, right? And particularly after we came back from 64. I mean, the guys were saying, oh, we knew they weren't going to accept us, and they weren't going to. No, they didn't. You know, everybody assumed we're going to have our Mississippi Freedom Delegation accepted, and it will be that will be the delegation at the Democratic Convention. But what was interesting is at that meeting that I talked about, there was a point when people were at each other. Now, I will say, when I say at each other, oftentimes that was, I don't remember any time when people personally attacked folks, right? It was about positions. Well, that's not, that doesn't adhere to what we believe as, or I don't think that's going to work, but it wasn't a personal attack. Okay. However, people were at each other in a way that I had never seen before. So this is 64, that meeting in the fall. And at a certain point, when I just couldn't figure out what was going on, it was like chaos. You know, it was, I don't know what's going to happen here. And Foreman started singing, "Will the Circle Be Unbroken?" Right. Now, I didn't think it was going to work. Usually when you started a freedom song, people would start singing and it would be fine. But I didn't think folks would pick it up. I mean, first of all, Foreman didn't sing that swell. But the other part was, you know, I thought we were everybody seemed so mad at each other. And yet people started singing because they started remembering what we meant to each other, you know, the times we'd been through each other, what it just brought back certain things that we only had each other, all that stuff, right? And we started singing. Now, that didn't mean it was the end of the arguments and all that stuff, but there was a moment in time where we were reminded about what we meant to each other. And so I think about some of that, you know, I mean, obviously at a certain point, I also felt, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know where we're going. And so I went back to school, you know, I mean, so it's not that it went forever, but we kept going in some other way. So for me, Drum and Spear was an iteration of SNCC, that there were other ways that SNCC lived in my life that worked for me. But what you're talking about, I'm trying to figure out what is it that you figure you can call on?
That really resonates with me. And I was reflecting because last week, Aja Monet, who's a dream defender and a renowned poet and revolutionary, she is releasing an album, and she came to Miami and held an album release party. And it was one of our first times like being back in like a social cultural space together. And it felt like since the pandemic, and it just felt like this like family reunion. Like it was really special. And I had, after being in the space, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like what's been missing over the last 3 years that has made this work so hard and grueling. And you know, because like cultural spaces have been such a big part. I mean, that's like the foundation of who Dream Defenders is. You know, Phil used to host, he had a Smoke Signal studio with Aja. They would host parties in their backyard. And many of our leaders were part of this artist collective, Femme Power, that held a weekly study circle and also, you know, made art together. We had a group called Poetry for the People, which would come together and make poetry together every week. There was another group in Miami called Black Family, which was a collective of Black artists. And so all of that was so much of what has sustained community in Dream Defenders over the years. And all of those entities, for many, a variety of different reasons, like don't exist anymore and fell apart during or right before the pandemic. And you really feel the difference. Like, even if we're like just being in space together in like it allows you to see people's humanity in a way where you're on Zoom talking about the work, like you just don't see people's humanity in the same way. And even in like the broader movement ecosystem outside of Dream Defenders in Miami, like some of the organizations, like even if we didn't work together, we'd all go to this party, you know, every couple months and, you know, and kick it together, and how much that did for like our resilience, feeling connected as a movement ecosystem. So I think we're in a real place of like, how do we rebuild the cultural spaces in Dream Defenders post-pandemic? I mean, other practices we've done are like circles, restorative justice circles, where you just hold space for people to like share their truth and to hear from everybody. Like, how do we use more of these tools, the cultural, the you know, the restorative justice circles, to just create space for us to see each other. And I think that that's so important on so many levels, because I think the conditions for organizing are so hard right now. And there's a way in which we can like internalize our failures as like, oh, Rachel is a failure as a leader. X person is a failure as a leader. Like, we can just internalize all the failures, and maybe we're not failures. It's just that the conditions are really hard. And there's something about being in space together and being able to see each other, share our experiences where we're like, oh, it's not me, it's the conditions, and we need each other. Like, I see you as a human, you see me as a human, and we like need each other to get through this. Like the community, the collectivity, that is like what keeps us going. And I think our movement in this like post-pandemic or pandemic, everything living on Zoom life, there's just no, like, organizing is about relationships, and like there's no, you can't remake that online, you know? So that's really where I'm at. I'm like, how do we bring more of that back into our movements? Because that is what sustains us and keeps us together.
Yeah, I agree. I would say when I joined BYP 100, I think that was even still to this day, like folks will name like our like merch, our design of the different, you know, our all of the different merchandise that we have, along with like the songs that we've created, the videos that's been created that really showcase young Black radical folks taking on these like really creative types of direct action, like in Chicago and DC, and even in Durham. And we were already kind of on Zoom in different ways because it's a national organization, so we had to communicate in some kind of way. And a lot of that cultural work was instituted by some of the founding members that have since kind of moved on and just gotten into different things, are still in music or are still designing things, but are doing it in different ways. And it's been really difficult to like kind of rebuild that commitment, that willingness to just do it, also without getting paid is another thread. Around the nonprofit thing is like folks don't even know how to be members because they think they should. They think that the things that they're doing is extraordinary and that therefore they should be getting paid for their time, which is also neoliberalism. Anyway, I think the thing that I think the thing is obviously recognizing that what we're in is not new to us, and it's not unique to our organization. I think like being up to date and disciplined about, for me, I think knowing the history of different organizations that are similar to us, that took on the challenge of like revolutionary change in their lifetimes, and learning from the fact that they're on a journey. And then honestly, like if nothing else, what keeps me in it is like the community of other like Black women, and Black people that have decided to be in these positions, and being able to just call on them or go on vacations together, or like just different ways that we like are able to not feel isolated, and remind ourselves that we're not alone in the struggles, but to also like really carve out time to just be the other parts of ourselves together as well. So like for me, having a really deep and long-lasting relationship with Rachel and JoJo and Naila, but also the folks in Minneapolis, there's Candace and Miski, and there's other folks, having a relationship with Mercedes down in Texas, and like just different organizers that I really kind of grew up with, and always being available for them, and them being available for me to just talk through like what is happening and why is this happening, which has been really helpful for me and has helped me continue to feel really supported, because it just is an isolating position. The pandemic hasn't helped it. And then you have people that have been in the movement for 2 seconds and can tell you what everything that you're doing wrong, that you already know. It can drive you in a lot of different directions. But I think my biggest, the biggest thing that's kept me in is the community of other directors, honestly, of organizations. Yeah, if I was truly by myself, I probably would have quit a very long time ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I got 2 last questions.
Yeah.
What say two or three things that you try and keep in mind as you're organizing, whatever group you're organizing?
One that comes up immediately for me is just like, we need people. We need the people.
That's
and
mine.
I think we're living in a really unique time where, because of the internet, young people are becoming radicalized really quickly. Like, I mean, when I was growing up, abolition, socialism, feminism, like I kind of stumbled upon that. Like it wasn't like in my face on the internet all the time. And I think it's really beautiful that young people are like becoming radicalized, grasping onto this politic. And I think it can make them a little impatient and forget that they once didn't have access to that knowledge, and feel like, well, anybody who disagrees with me, I don't need them. And we will not be able to win an abolitionist, feminist, socialist world without the people. Like, we need to be moving with the people. And that means we're going to need to meet people where they're at, and they're not going to always agree with us. And we need to grapple with the real realities of people's lives that create barriers for them to access the politic, that create contradictions where they disagree with the politic. And there's no skipping the step of being with the people. So that would be my first thing. And I'm really excited. Dream Defenders has been building out this Healing and Justice Center over the last couple of years, which was basically, we realized that, we were talking to people in the community about abolition, about big ideas like defund the police. And people in the community were like, okay, and what are you going to do about gun violence? And how are you going to ensure that my daughter makes it home safe from school every day. And so we have been creating this community-based public safety strategy that includes violence interruption and healing and trauma recovery support for people who are survivors of violence. And we have a mental health mobile crisis. And we were like, we need to really invest in, if we are saying we are tearing down the system of police, we want to tear down the prison system, what is the alternative? And so we've been working to build out that alternative and being able to meet a community need around safety while also saying these systems aren't keeping us safe. And that we really are investing in that because we believe that's what the practice of building that is what's going to move people to the abolitionist politics. So I'm really excited about that. The other thing I would just say is like, this is a long struggle. And it is not going to be achieved in our lifetime. So to have patience with ourselves and have patience with others and have patience with the process and to figure out what's going to sustain you long term. I think everybody thinks they're like above burnout at some point. You know, like people used to tell me, Rachel, you're going to burn out. And I'd be like, me? Never. Like maybe the rest of those people did, but not me. Like this is where, you know, this is what drives me. And like, I burnt out, you know? So I'm really in a place of figuring out like, what is going to sustain me? Because this is a long, long struggle. I want to be able to figure out what I can do in my lifetime to pass off, to change the conditions and make things a little bit more possible in the next generation's lifetime. And so how do we build a real muscle around resilience and this being a long struggle?
Yeah. Your first point, you've already was also one of mine, was like, we need everybody, like organize everybody. And I think to not repeat echoing what a lot of.
You'll say it your own way. Repeat, it's fine.
I think like, we just need to organize everybody. Like we have to provide opportunities for folks to join. Whatever it is, to join a meeting, to join a phone bank, to join whatever it is. And I think like sometimes we think that providing these like huge, like all of this like intentional vetting and like, oh, people need to know, have some baseline understanding of XYZ before coming in. And it's just like, that may work for some people, but it wouldn't work for my family. For my mom, for my sisters. I think providing some people with something to do, like Rachel has said, like actually just being in the practice of the thing also politicizes us. It's not just reading, it's not just studying, it's not just talking to each other, it's not talking to who you feel safe with, it's not just talking to who you agree with. And we just have to be in better practice of talking to people that we don't agree with, because we're going to also need them in some kind of way. And I think the other point that I first thought of was like, it's not about me. Like, it's not about me. It's like, it is about me, but it's really not about me. And I'm still like very much working through like when things come up, especially challenges and especially like critiques that people bring about the way that the organization is moving or what mistakes we've made or who we didn't send an invitation to for this thing that they should really have an invitation to. It's like, oh, nope, that is not about me. It's not about Dee. It's not about the director. It's not about me. There's a much larger larger issue and systemic issue that requires unpacking, but it also requires participation. Like it requires people to be in it. And I think that I've underestimated the challenges that I would face in my role, obviously, because I didn't predict a pandemic. I was like, oh yeah, like, you know, I can move really fast. I can be really action oriented. I can like not think about people's feelings before doing a thing. I know those things about me. And then there are other challenges that obviously I didn't foresee. And so it became about me figuring out what is the thing that I am doing wrong. What is the thing that is coming up as a pattern that people are mentioning about me? what is the thing that folks are really struggling with in the organization that my leadership is not giving space to? And it took a while, and it's still a challenge for me to like just remind myself that like the things that folks bring as issues, conflicts, challenges, contradictions are not about me just because I'm in this role. Yeah, and that's just an everyday process for me.
Yeah, that really resonates, Dee, and I think what did I want to say? I think there's a way, I don't know, where people can also like give up their power to the leader. Like, you didn't do a thing and therefore like you messed up, as opposed to like, no, like, okay, you go, if you see a thing that needs to be done, like go and do it. And yeah, I just think there's a lot of ways, but I don't know if it's like a product of the nonprofit industrial complex, but there is a way in which like people like have like expect everything from the leader and don't find their own agency to like do the things that need to be done.
Right.
And I've just been in a place of like, how do we like really, when people join the organization, help them feel a sense of agency? Like, building this new world is not going to fall on an executive director to like do a thing or not do a thing. It's going to fall on like all of us building the thing. Yeah. And yeah, I just think there's a way in which the structure of the nonprofit system like allows people to like constantly not feel like they have agency and like to not be bringing like the spirit of protagonism into the work. And so I am really like, how do we create that as like the foundation? Like without that, nothing's going to be possible in building our organizations. So yeah.
You know, it's interesting because when you were talking about you had commonalities in the first two, what I had just thought, the first two on my points were going to be listen, don't assume you know what the community wants or needs. And then the second one was meet people where they are, not where you think they should be. And never assume that you know more than they do, because sometimes they know a whole lot more. And I always remember going with Julian when Ivanhoe had decided, let us see how we can bring the values and the politics of SNCC into electoral politics, right? So that's when I run this campaign office, not the campaign, and Ivanhoe and Charlie run Julian's first campaign. Okay, and so I remember Julian was we go to the Red Rosebud Savings Club, a group of elderly Black women in Atlanta. And honey, you walked in and you would have thought he was the prince. I mean, you know, it was like, oh, this is the man I want my daughter to marry. You know, I mean, all that stuff. But the main point was they're assuming that he's going to tell them what he's going to do. And the first thing that Julian does is he says, well, what do you want? What do you think you need in your community? And you could tell they were absolutely shocked, because they had been used to politicians telling me I can give you this and I can give you, you know, chicken every pot and whatever. And I think we need to do this and this. They were not used to being asked what they thought their community needed. So, so I was thinking about that, but I was also thinking, you know, and it's one of the things between the newer generation and the old, and some of us in the older generation, that it took us a while in the older to realize that well, we learned it close sooner than some others, but in any event, it's SNCC, that mobilizing was not organizing, right? Now, it was harder for you, for the younger generation, because you had social media. You could get 2,000 people on a march, but that wasn't organizing. And so for us, it's like, well, wait a minute, does your neighbor know, you know, who you are and what you do? Because for us, it was, we are going to these people's doors, asking them to register to vote, and they're putting their lives in our hands. And we're only 19 and 20 years old. They are putting the lives of themselves and their families and the communities. Okay. And so they need to trust us. They need to know who we are. So I don't know how we would do that over social media, because they need to see you, right?
Right.
I mean, when Bob would go into a community, he would sit on the porch. He'd talk to the kids. And that would go on for 2 or 3 weeks before he even mentioned, well, you know, we're doing this voter registration campaign. because they needed to know who he was. So I don't know how you do that in the social, with the social media, but generally to know mobilizing is an organizing. But the other thing I would mention is, and this is somebody who, I get pissed. I remember when I was working with the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice in New York, right? Spate of police brutality. And Officer Sullivan kills Eleanor Bumper, 69 years old, with a shotgun over an eviction. And then the Black mayor promotes Officer Sullivan, right? I remember when I heard this, I remember punching the wall with my fist at my my apartment, rent-controlled apartment at 159th Street in Harlem, right? Because I was so mad. But the thing is, what you realize is that it can't just be about, it can't even primarily be about the anger, right? Because honey, that will burn you out in a minute, which is why all the cultural stuff you all are talking about is really what, you got to be angry because these people are stupid and they want you dead. So there is that. But the other part is, how do you do this other stuff that keeps you going? And it's like, I will give the finger in a minute to somebody who passes me, right? But what I realize is that when I do in a car, but what I realize is that it also, it takes a lot of energy out of me. And that's energy that I'm not spending on something that really is going to make some difference, because my giving the finger to somebody is not going to help anybody, The other part, and I would just mention this long struggle thing, when we went into the communities, a lot of those folks had been working for 30, 40 years before we got there, right? So Mrs. Boynton in Alabama in the 1940s, she's doing this voter registration thing. When Bob goes in, it's Amzie Moore, and he starts talking about Regional Council of Negro Leadership, and they were building it, and it's the World War II vets, so. But the first time I understood that was with E.D. Nixon, when I'm interviewing him for Eyes on the Prize, and he says, well, when we started building the, Montgomery bus boycott stuff, he said, at first I was doing this for the young people who would come behind me. And then I realized, well, shoot, I want to see some of this stuff myself, he says, but it is always in their minds, is always a sense that they may never see the change that they're working for. And that was like a big revelation to me. And I didn't actually get that at SNCC. I got that with E.D. Nixon, who becomes something else. But anyway, at least, I get this thing from him saying, I didn't even know whether I'd see it. But the whole point being, if you don't do anything, then nothing changes. So then where does that leave you? Right. So some of it is what other people pass on to you. What I've learned most was passed on to me from somebody else, because I didn't think about it, Okay, last question. What would you most want to pass on to current or future organizers?
Yeah, I think, well, one of the things that we've learned in Bold is kind of like, is really about, it's like how you do one thing is how you do everything, but also learning about just the beauty of discipline. And I think you have I had one vision of what I thought being like discipline was, which was like what I read in the history books about these super militant revolutionaries that like freed their whole countries, you know what I mean? And I think that the other like discipline, because the challenges that we're facing are old but new, and that hope is a discipline. Like, it's not something that is like inherent to who you are. It's not even, it has nothing to do with, what class you're in or what your gender or sexual, like none of that actually matters. Like, hope is a discipline that is a muscle that you have to strengthen yourself. And the way that I gain hope is by learning about history, talking to you, Judy, and talking to Cortland, and talking to some of the other folks that I really look to that have been in this work for a really, really long time. And that helps to really grow my discipline to keep keep the hope of my generation, of what we're up against, that we will, build a revolution at some point, and hoping that if nothing else, that the organizing and the community that I'm a part of plays a role in that freedom and in that revolution being manifested. But it is not easy, obviously, because we have social media that creates an attention deficit. It also makes like being politicized a quick and easy thing to do, and it makes you feel like you're in one place, but you're really not. And that the community, the organizers, the practices, the cultural elements of our work help to also grow the discipline. Help to grow the hope of what we're trying to be up to, and it feeling attainable.
Yeah, thank you, Didi. Hope. Hope is super important, and I love what you said around it not being like inherent to you are, but a thing we have to cultivate, like a discipline. I think the other thing that is coming up for me is just like, I don't know, just the importance of like, I feel like I've said it a few times, but just like what a beautiful thing it is to be a part of the movement. Like, I feel grateful. Like, I've been really trying to practice gratitude that like I made it to the movement. I could be a million and one other places, and like, what just a divine journey to have made it to be a part of movement, and just what a beautiful thing. Struggle is like really hard. Like, it's a really hard life path, and it's like a really beautiful life path. And like the opportunity to be like building an organization, it's messy, it's complicated, it is hard, but it's also like a really beautiful thing. Like getting the opportunity. I mean, what Mary Hooks's quote around like transformation, like we're transforming communities, we're transforming the world, and we're like transforming ourselves in the process. Just like what a beautiful gift that is to like be a part of like an intentional community that is like committed to the change in the world, but the change in ourselves. So just like remembering to be grateful for just what a beautiful, awesome thing it is to be in this movement, and just what a gift it is to get to wake up and like listen and learn from all the people we encounter, the people out in the community, people in the organizations. It's so just what an awesome opportunity and gift it is to get to sit down with you, Judy, and just other elders who are like really invested in revolution and believe in our leadership and want to support our leadership. So the opportunity to like get to sit with y'all and listen from y'all, the opportunity to listen from history like Didi was talking about. So just what a gift it is, and to just really soak in and sit with that.
Yeah. And I think for me, I would do what you all have already talked about. You all have already figured it out in terms of this, which is that you really, it's so hard. I mean, all of this is so hard. That you really do have to build a community around you. You have to figure out, even if it's just 2 more people, you cannot sustain this kind of struggle on your own. So you've got to find some other people who believe as you do. And that hope thing is so important. Oh my goodness. I luckily am surrounded by people who really do think you can change stuff. Right. But what you hear oftentimes in your family or whatever, why even bother? It's always been this way. It's not going to change. Look at all the forces against you. Why are you even voting? It's all of that. So you really do have to surround yourself with people who believe that if you organize and you work for it, and that you can really change this stuff. And one of the things we realized early on at SNCC, I think, was that we really could do that. That was the problem with the forces against us. They allowed us to understand, whatever they did wrong we then now understand that we can change things. Okay. And for me, at my age, what's amazing is that I have still that community, right? So in our 70s, I mean, I won't even mention my age at this point because I'm in total denial, but you know, I am now going into this board meeting and I will see people I've known for 60 years. And, you know, the women are not just sitting around knitting baby booties, right? I mean, we are actively engaged. You know, Dottie Zellner is doing work with Palestine, Israel, you know, Karen is still doing work. You know, I mean, everybody is, Jennifer is still, all the, Cortland, of course, is, you know, going down to the LDF meeting. He's doing this. Charlie Cobb is writing a book. Everybody assumes we're not going to stop. Now, we may change how we do things, but we are still this band of brothers and sisters in a circle of trust. And I just get this email from Cortland saying, oh, what freedom songs do you want to, you know, send me your list of freedom songs because they know that's my thing. I can't, I keep a tune, but my voice, no. But you got to have the music, right? Because as Bernice Johnson Reagan said, she said, I don't see how you do a meeting without music. So that will be all the way through. There are things that you grab onto that keep you going, you know, and part of it is the people around me that I've known for 60 years. Doesn't mean I don't argue with them, but some of you have seen me and Cortland get at it. But it's still at the core, it is the sense that we are in the same struggle and that we will be there for each other and that's important, you know. And then we sing, you know, will the circle be unbroken? So, okay. Is there anything else that you all want to say as parting comment? You all have been wonderful, by the way, I got to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just really grateful to have this time to kind of reflect on what all has been going on. And I really, really crave more of this time, especially like just the past 10 years. And I was in another space with a bunch of organizers and we were reflecting on 2013 to now, and like we're just getting in alignment about what even happened. Like Rachel's idea of what happened at XYZ meeting may be different, you know what I mean? And like just really craving those reflective spaces. And I think the pandemic has kind of robbed us of being in spaces together to intentionally reflect for a long time about what we've been up to, what organizations have been birthed out of this time and all of that. And I hope that like moving forward, we do dedicate some real time to that. But yeah, just deeply appreciative of you, Judy, always being so welcoming to all the things, willing to answer all of our questions. And and I'm also like, we need more people and we need more organizations. Like, we do not need less. We absolutely need more. I hope more get built. I'm supportive to any like radical organization that gets built at this point, honestly. Because it's just so much ground to cover that we have. And just, I feel like the longer that I'm in movement, the more problems I see that need to be dealt with. And we can't do them all. So that's my last thing.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, more space for reflection. And I think especially in these just really challenging, scary times ahead, we're really feeling it in Florida, like the threat of fascism. I'm really yearning to be in more space of reflection with my peers, but also of elders, just to be able to put this moment in a larger context and make sense of it, to be in conversation with folks internationally. There's so much to learn from what's happening around the world right now. So I echo the desire for more reflection, and just really grateful for the spaces that the intentionality SNCC has had around one, just passing down your history and doing so in such like, I just feel like the community you all have that you've been able to maintain and pass down really like clear, coherent lessons to our generation is just like really, really useful. And yeah, just really grateful for y'all's commitment to the intergenerational spaces and just, yeah, want more of it.
Well, see, it re-energizes us. I mean, because one of the things I will say is the problems that you all are dealing with, we didn't have to deal with. There are just so many, I mean, there are times when I'm just amazed you all are still here. You know, I mean, it's just, it really is. There are levels that we never had to operate on. Yeah, they wanted to kill us. It was all that stuff. But there's another level that you all have had to deal with for the last 10, 15, 20, that we didn't have to. So I am so impressed and I'm just honored to be in y'all's company. I mean, and we get energized. That's one of the reasons we do it. It's not just because, you know, we're just, you know, wonderful people and we want to pass down the stuff. It's because every time I get off one of these calls, it's like, whoa, let me do a little TK birthday. Let me do a little salsa. Let me just, you know, so it is wonderful. That's right. Oh,
Right.
I got out of bed a couple of weeks ago. I was getting in, I'm a late riser, but I'm also, you know, I don't go to bed till about 1:30. Okay, so I'm getting in bed. I happen to have a radio on, and it was it T-Tail Point? I'm trying to remember who does this, but it was cornbread, hog maw, and chitlins. Okay, so I get out of the bed, right? And I start doing a little salsa, and then I get back in again. But that kind of energy is what we get from you guys. I mean, so it's not a one-way street on this. Now, I'm just going to end this because otherwise I could go on forever. Because Miss Baker, I'm going to close out with a Miss Baker quote, which is, and it's short. She says, I'm part of the human family. What the human family will accomplish, I can't control. But somewhere down the line, the numbers increase. The tribe increases. So how do you keep on? She says, I can't help it. I believe that the struggle is eternal. Somebody else carries on, and that's y'all. So I'm just so happy to be here. Okay, so go and play some music when you get off this call. I don't care what kind of music it is, because just jump, you know, dance around the room.